In this video, we're going to go over finding water leaks in the rear of a Honda Element and fixing them. First, we'll start by taking off the 10mm bolt, which is one of two holding on the rear panel over the C and D pillar. Once we have the rear 10mm bolt out, we'll need to remove the roof rack to get to the other bolt holding on the other panel. To do this, you want to pry up very carefully on the plastic cover. I could not do this while shooting the video, so it is loose there, but you just need to pry up along that, which is holding in those two pins there. Underneath that, you'll see we have three 5mm Allen key bolts that we're going to go ahead and remove so that we can then lift up the assembly and get to the front 10mm bolt holding on that trim garnish. So we'll take that 10mm bolt off, and then we'll be able to slide back on that garnish trim panel. As of shooting this, my 2003 Element is 18 years old, so the plastic could be quite brittle, so I tried to be as gentle as possible. It was also stuck on quite well. After a little bit of convincing and hitting on it to loosen it up, I was able to safely pry the panel off and slide it backwards completely. With the garnish panel removed, you'll be able to see the plastic guides that hold the trim in place, as well as the bare metal of the vehicle structure. I'm going to go ahead and clean mine off so that we can find where the leak is coming from. After spraying my Element with water for a while, as well as cleaning up the surface, I found a pin-sized hole that actually existed in what looks to be a condition that would have been straight from the factory and just not noticed for this long. If we look closer, it seems to be that is where the water is entering, because it is a small amount that I get after the high-pressure car wash. You can see here, if you watch the flow of the water with the particulate, that it does drain into that hole. After careful inspection of the bare metal bodywork, I couldn't find anywhere else along any of the seams that it would be leaking, and I didn't see any water flow anywhere else other than that pin-sized hole. It could be that in your scenario, hopefully that hole doesn't exist, but maybe the body filler seam there is cracked over time or with age, and that's where you'll need to epoxy. But I'm pretty sure for my scenario I'm going to have to just clean up and cover up that pin-sized hole. After all of our test spraying and water, this is roughly what the amount of water I had. I did wipe it up once, but basically I would say 20-30% of what I was spraying directly on it was getting right in and leaking down in from the seatbelt fixture point for the rear. To resolve that now, I'll kind of clean up the surface, and I'm also going to try and clean up any residual water from our testing, just to make sure that I have a nice clean dry area that I'm applying my epoxy to. Next, I'll take my silicone, what I was calling epoxy sealant, and we'll go ahead and take a toothpick and just get a very fine amount, as I don't want to gob on a lot. I'm going to try and start this way first and then test and make sure that it's watertight, and that's truly the only place I was leaking before I go and do any further, frankly ugly epoxying of the vehicle, even though it is covered by the garnish panel. Once we have the silicone on, we'll want to let it dry for about 24 hours, and since I'm in a cold climate, I sped it up. With our sealant all cured, we're going to go ahead and put our trim panel garnish back on. So we'll match up our plastic clips and make sure that they're all in the correct direction as they can move, and we'll very carefully line it up and slide it on so that we don't crack or put pressure anywhere to cause any damage to that trim panel, as it may be fragile given that it's aged plastic. Now that we have the trim panel back on, we're going to check our fitment all the way around, make sure that it's lined up just like it was before disassembly, and then we're going to go ahead and put that front 10mm bolt underneath the roof rack assembly back in. Next, we'll go and put our roof rack assembly back and put those 5mm Allen head screws back in place to fasten that down. In the part that I couldn't film earlier, to break them free, I did use a 6-inch 3/8 drive extension to break them free, and now I'm going to do the same thing, but very carefully to just snug them down and make sure that I have enough force on them to hold it safely in place. Our last step on the roof will be to put the plastic cover back in. We'll want to make sure we line up those plastic pins holding it in place, and then give it one firm hit down to kind of secure it and make sure that it's on and lined up. Back in the rear hatch area, we're going to go ahead and put that rear 10mm bolt in to secure the trim garnish there. With all of our fasteners back in place, we'll just double check our fitment one more time, and then we'll go take it to the pressure car wash to test. After the car wash, we'll go and inspect that rear seatbelt anchor point. It looks to be dry, and I think we should be good to go. Thanks for watching, and see the description for all of the tools and materials used.